shooting sports and a couple of things like that, right? And I hadn't really been able to make it at the normal time. It's like I got back from Houston a bit earlier than I thought I might have. We had a meeting of the minds between the LaRouche group, the headquartered in Houston, and the platform committee of the Republican Party in Texas, right? We're talking about what to do with the Federal Reserve. I think everybody agrees you need to get rid of it, but what do you replace it with? The LaRouche group is talking about replacing it with a third national bank, along the same lines that Alexander Hamilton was wanting to do. Okay, and that's a weird topic. You could spend a couple of hours talking about that. And then you guys were talking about shooting sports, and that's sort of interesting, right? We're talking about crossbows and things of that nature. Let me see if I can find a couple of these things. We were talking about the Umarex. Okay to share my screen at this point?
Yeah.
Okay. Image cable. Hang on. Need to dismiss this, and then, like somewhere here, it's going to say share my screen, right? Damn. I mean, from one time I ever used Skype to the next, okay, share. It always looks a little bit different. Share, Facebook, Twitter, no. Not what I want. Damn. Hang on. Share my screen. It's got to be here somewhere. Let's share. Oh, I'm not on the Skype screen. Sure. Share screen. Yeah. Okay, here, and then share. Got it. Momentarily here. Boy. Are you guys seeing my screen here?
Yeah, the face on Mars.
Okay, so we're in business here. I wanted to talk about that air-powered bow, right? You can't really call it a bow, right? It's a weapon for firing arrows, right? It behaves close thing compared to would be a spearfisher's spear gun, right? But a spear gun underwater, I think you're talking about shooting things which are no more than 15 feet away, right? This thing we're talking about here is made for shooting things out to substantial distances. I can get back to what it was. Oh boy. Here we go.
Yeah, I can see your screen in Skype, but on the...
Yeah, okay, this is YouTube, right? And what the guy has here is like a $325 item on eBay, right? It's a company that produces called Umarex. And there's other companies that produce similar things, right? But I think Umarex is the best known of them and the one that was there first. They've got a little bit of a jump right. Watch this. I mean, this is shooting very hard compared to any other way to fire arrows that there's ever been.
By aftermarket, because it does have Picatinny rails on 3 sides. Mount a bipod to it if you'd like. It's a bolt action. You've got a trigger safety here. Nice texturing. I feel like we've done a great job on the stock. It's attractive. It's an OD green. To fill it, you got to use a pump. This is a hand pump. This is a high pressure air pump. It'll go up to 4,500 psi. It can get a little strenuous, so there are air compressor methods that are quite easy to use. But either way, you can fill it 3,000 psi or 3,625, like I said. You'll get
Yeah, okay. He's generally using the same kind of a pressure pump that you would use for scuba equipment. Okay, he's using about the same level of pressure that would use for scuba tanks. And I mean, this is a fearful weapon. It's like, you notice it doesn't make very much noise. Now, you know what you've got is a hollow tube, which is basically the barrel of the thing, and then you've got an arrow that fits over that, right? And as opposed to normal bows, right? A normal bow is pushing against the base of an arrow, right? It's like against the nock of an arrow. So it's, you know, there's a couple of ways that could lose accuracy. Which this doesn't do that. This is the ear column is pushing on the head of the arrow. It's like there's no nock in these arrows. It's like it's open on the bottom end, right? So that aside from everything else, it's reasonably quiet. Okay, and the reason for that is that before any of this air ever escapes from the muzzle, before you ever get any sort of muzzle blast or whatever you want to call it, right? It's like this air column it hasn't traveled 31 inches, it's traveled 62 inches. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Because the air column is moving inside this this barrel, and then it has to also move inside the arrow. So the arrow acts like a 30-inch extension of the barrel. You see, so it's got, by the time the air column leaves the rear part of the arrow, it's like, you know, the pressure is dissipated substantially. You see what I'm saying? So that, I mean, this is not going to attract anybody's attention or anything like that. It's shooting at about 450 or 500 feet per second, right, which is just way beyond anything anybody's ever achieved with a crossbow or anything like that. It's going to easily drive any normal type of an arrow or and broadhead through any normal kind of a deer, right, which would be a large whitetail, it could be a mule deer, it could be whatever, right? But I mean, it's going to go through a normal deer, right? Now, I don't know whether it would go through an elk or whether it would go through a moose or something like that, or a Cape buffalo, who knows, right? I mean, I don't think it would make any sense to try to shoot a Cape buffalo with this, but that's about the point at which you would stop you know. At the point of Cape buffalo, then you use firearms, right? But I mean, up in, you know, short of that, it's like, you know, there aren't too many things this couldn't kill.
Reliant on gunpowder or any other material that might be in short supply.
No, it's, in other words, you can pump it up with that hand pump that you saw the guy with, right? It's the simplest contrivance that there is, you know, that anybody could use, you know, without using smokeless powder, without using anything like that. No. Gail, do you understand the difference between black powder and smokeless powder?
No, could you explain it for the audience?
Yeah, okay. It's like the kind of powder that everybody used up until about 18, you know, all the way from the Middle Ages until the 1870s, 1880s, was maybe at most 50% efficient. It's like at least half of the black powder was being turned into a black gooky smoke, right? So that if you ever had a gunfight in a saloon, you know, like in Lawman or something like that, right, in the age of black powder weapons, you wouldn't even have to hit somebody with a bullet. The air pollution would kill him, right? And you had battles that were being fought in Europe where people would line up and start blasting away with these old muskets, and you'd get like maybe one or two shots off, then you'd have to stop and wait 30 minutes for the smoke to dissipate, you know, in the field, you know, to get to where you can even see the other guys again, right, and then have another go at it, right? So, I mean, it's a stupid way to fight wars. Now, in the 1880s, I guess, you know, they developed, you know, the kinds of powder that we use now. It's modern smokeless powder, you know, like nitrocellulose, that kind of thing, right? And that stuff doesn't produce the smoke, right? That stuff is like 90, 95, or close to 100% efficient. It's like if you get to the most modern versions of it. Yeah, you know, so it's producing a lot more power for the same volume of powder, right? These tiny little cartridge cases that you see for the 9mm and the modern the modern pistol cartridges are like just using almost not quite, it's an exaggeration, right? But I mean, I was going to say microscopic amounts of pistol powder. That stuff burns very fast, and it just doesn't take more than the tiniest bit of the stuff. Yeah, I've never tried to reload pistol ammunition, right? I assume it could be dangerous because there's a possibility of overloading one of those, and it's like if you overload one of those, it's like you could blow the rear part of the barrel for a semi-auto pistol apart. Understand what I'm saying? Pistol ammunition is too cheap. I don't see the point. Let me get on with some of this other stuff, right? Mechanical broadheads was like, where do we even start with that? Dale, do you use mechanicals or do you use just plain ordinary broadheads?
I use mechanicals. It's a lot easier, and they're actually geometrically easier to go through the options.
Okay, it's like I don't know if most people saw what the problem was or why you have mechanicals. It's like, as long as nobody was shooting much, I mean, with long bows or with recurve bows, your normal kinds of bows, I don't think anybody ever shot anything more than about 170 feet per second or somewhere around there, right? At that rate of speed, it's like nothing was going to hydroplane or do anything stupid, just because of the speed, right? Once you started getting up to the first generation of compound bows, then you were still talking about maybe 220 feet per second, something like that, right? At any rate, you still could use ordinary broadheads. Once you started getting like to the second, maybe third generation of compound bows, all of a sudden it's like you're shooting at 270 or 280 feet per second, and then you started seeing crazy things happen. It was like the arrows would veer and fly off, and I mean they would hit a point where that same arrow with a target point on it would hit the bullseye, right? Whereas with that broadhead on it, it was going to be a foot off to the left, and maybe. Give me a second. Let me try to turn this thing off. Okay, that should be off. I get all these ridiculous political calls coming in. Once you have that kind of speed, right, then the broadheads, the ordinary broadheads, would make the arrow veer and turn in the air, right? It was like like a curved ball in baseball or something, right? It was not something you wanted to have happen, and it was possible to tune that stuff out. Sometimes, if you did the world's best job of tuning a bow and getting the exact setting that you want for the arrow rest, so the arrow flew exactly straight, which it was hard to do. If you ever did it, then you could tune 90% of that veering out. But at that point, people said, "Hey, screw this, right? Let's just make mechanical broadheads and have the broadhead open on impact, right? So let's eliminate the problem." Now, you've got all kinds of mechanical broadheads available. There's one that I particularly like, and see if I can find this here. It's not the Rage, right? Here, these are ordinary mechanical broadheads, right? I mean, these are broadheads that open from the front. Okay, and you can find these like on just search for mechanical broadheads on eBay, right? And I don't know what this is exactly, but most of these open from the front. You see what I'm saying? It's like they're going to have to go through hide and ribs before they open, right? And that's gonna take away power, right? You're gonna use power to get the arrow head through hide and ribs. Whereas this thing that I like doesn't do this. This thing that I like is called an aftershock, and there may be one or two others which operate the same way, right? And aftershock 125 grain. I like the 85 grain aftershock. It's a bit better. There's a reason for that. Let me click on this. That's I don't know if this is going to do it here. Here you get an idea of what's going on, right? When you see the picture on the bottom left, right? It's like when this arrowhead goes through something, it doesn't use any energy getting past hide and ribs, right? You see those two little wings at the bottom? This thing opens from the rear, it doesn't open from the front, right? In other words, the point, the chisel point, is all the way through the hide and the ribs before the thing opens, right? And it opens to a 2-inch cutting edge. Can you see what's going to happen with this, Daryl?
Mm-hmm.
This thing is going to go through hide and ribs, and then it's going to open to a 2-inch wide cutting edge, right? So, I mean, this is going to just, it's going to be a quick kill as a general thing, right? It's like the thing that I liked about the 85 grain versions was, give me a second, the 85 grain version wasn't going to stop when it hit like ribs on the far side. The 125 or 150 grain version of the thing could stop. In other words, it could go through and it could open the way it's supposed to on the inside after it gets through the ribs, on entry, right? But then once it's open like that, then it's gonna hit those ribs on the far side and it could bounce off, right? Here's an 80 grain blade. That's a rebuilds pack. Shoot. 100 grain blades. These are rebuilds packs. Not what I want. They're getting to be just a little bit hard to find. Aftershock blade. Come on, come on. I'd have to look through this for a while, but you get the idea, right? This is the type of broadhead that I recommend. It's a mechanical broadhead that opens from the rear, and it wastes no energy getting. Not only wastes no energy getting through hide and ribs like with the deer, but they've done experiments where they've taken like about 25 different kinds of mechanical broadheads and tried to shoot through a half-inch, a piece of half-inch plywood, right? And the only thing that made it through was the aftershock, right? None of the others got anything past the half inches of plywood, right? The aftershock got through and then opened, right, properly. So it could have done a much better job, than the others. That's the broadhead that I like. Now, when you talk about arrows, everybody advertises. Have you heard of this company, Daryl?
What? No, I have not. Oh, yeah, I have heard of them.
Okay.
The High Country, hell yeah.
High Country. See, everybody advertises bows, right? And everybody's, we have the best bow or we have the fastest bow. There's no such thing as a fastest or best bow. It's a matter of personal choice, right? There are too many factors involved in like how fast an arrow flies and all that kind of good stuff. So there isn't any such thing as a fastest bow, but there is such a thing as a fastest arrow, and this is it. This is this HCO Speed Pro Max, right? Like about 5.6 grains per inch, and that ends up like for a 30 or 31 inch draw, that ends up with an arrow which you're looking at about 300 grains, right? With even with 185 or 100 grain broadhead. You know, that makes for something which is very fast. I mean, shooting with a 75-pound bow, you're looking at, 340 or 345 feet per second, right? That's very fast. The difference between that and 300 feet per second or 200, are you 290 feet per second, right? 280, 290. Okay, that's going to be the difference between hitting something at 26 or 27 yards and missing it, right? Because, I mean, at the 280 or 290 feet per second at 26 yards, a deer might get under an arrow like that. It will just drop down, right? It's like 320 or 340 feet per second. The deer's not going to have time to do that. Okay. This is a neat product. What's the other thing that you would hear, right? You'll hear that you need a certain number of, a certain amount of weight for a certain arrow length, right? Now, I don't believe that's really up to speed, right? I don't believe the thinking behind that these charts that you see for like the amount of weight that you have to have for a certain arrow length. I mean, I don't think that's up to date anymore. What you don't want to have happen is to have an arrow I don't mean wobble, but like to behave like a sine wave or to what's the word I want for that? You understand what I'm saying, Daryl? It's like, you don't want to, it would happen, like certainly with wooden arrows, that would happen. You used to get this archer's curve, right? Or, you would get arrows that would flex and that would behave like a sine wave when it came off the bowstrings, right? You really don't want that, right? So you figured you had to have a certain amount of stiffness, right? And to have the stiffness, you had to have weight. That was the thinking, right? But when you really get good enough at manufacturing these carbon fiber arrows, then these are as stiff as you could ever want, and they're not heavy. So it's like, as long as you've got the stiffness, then you don't have to worry about the weight. I had one of these in a quiver by mistake once, and I was out practicing with a very heavy bow, which is like about 85, 87 pounds, and this was like an African game bow, and I never got to Africa, but it didn't happen, right? But at any rate, so I was practicing, I was shooting towards a hay bale, which was not anywhere near as substantial as I thought as it looked to be. And I had that high country arrow. Like I said, I shouldn't have had that. The arrows I had with that bow should have been like safari type arrows. But nonetheless, I shot that stupid thing through that hay bale and into an oak tree so hard, that I had to leave the arrowhead in the tree. I was able to turn the arrow enough to get the arrow out, right? And it just, target points aren't really valuable. Okay. Didn't harm the arrow. If you can believe this is shot like with an 86 or 87 pound bow through a hay bale and into a tree in such a way that it had to leave the arrowhead in the tree, and it didn't hurt the arrow. So, I mean, this is pretty strong, right? The only way I've had damage to these kinds of arrows is like if the glue in the front insert fails, right? I've never had one of these arrows fail on its own. So this is something else that I recommend. What else do I have here? Get to firearms here. Have both of you guys ever heard of gunbroker.com?
I haven't.
Hey, Daryl?
No, I haven't.
Okay, this is about as much as I had to say about archery. I've got like a favorite broadhead. I've got a favorite arrow. And then, I don't own one of those Umarex air bows, but if I was going to get back into hunting with arrows, I might have to go out and buy myself one of those. I mean, that looks like the cat's meow. That looks like something that would, just leave any other normal sort of bow hunting in the dust. Now, do you guys also understand why the crossbow was never the ultimate weapon in war?
It
They're
has to
slow.
be reloaded, and it's a slow reload. But it is an ultimate weapon because it can be attached. These could be attached to the bow. I mean, to the arrow, which could be used as a secondary projectile. So you get the first projectile, which is the arrow, going into the object. The secondary projectile would be the object that you put on the arrow, reaching the object.
Okay.
Like back in
Let me
the old
tell,
days, a stick of
let me tell you what
dynamite.
the problem was. Okay, it's like the problem is that like energy is measured in foot-pounds, right? The crossbow has the pounds, it doesn't have the feet. Okay. Now, what that means is that I've been at archery ranges like with one of my 75 or 80-pound bows, and there would be somebody next to me with a 130 or 150-pound crossbow. He could not shoot as hard. My arrows would be going through those targets, and the crossbow bolts wouldn't. Okay, and they wanted to know about that. Like I say, you don't have the feet. It's not the string is not operating on the arrow for as much of a distance, right? That's the difference. It's like the compound bow, the ordinary compound bow is shooting harder than the crossbow can under most circumstances, right? Now you had like battles between England and France in the Middle Ages, right, in the late Middle Ages, early Renaissance period, where the French armies would have Italian crossbowmen with them, mercenaries, Genoese, right? And so you had pitched battles between these Italian crossbow artists and the English with the longbows, and the Italians always got wiped in those. You know, that's the reason. The ultimate weapon of war in the Middle Ages for the period of maybe 800 or 1,000 years between the fall of the Roman Empire in the West and the rise of gunpowder weapons, right? Armies trained to use gunpowder weapons. The ultimate weapon of war was like that Turco-Mongol composite or composite bow, right? It was like it was more efficient. I mean, it didn't have the cams of a modern compound bow. But you have those ears, those outer ears on the Turco-Mongol bow, which really didn't weigh very much, right? So the main thing that was moving on a Turco-Mongol bow was those outer ears, right? You understand what I'm saying? The thing that you want to avoid with the basic construction of a bow is to have, you know, stored energy being moved back into the frame of the bow in the form of vibration, right? It's like that you don't want. And the Turco-Mongol bow did a much better job of eliminating that. There were cases in the Middle Ages also, like at the time of Henry VIII, where you know they would do a comparison between the Turkish bow and the English longbows. The Turkish bow was just shooting harder. We could see the difference, right? What all do I have here that looks like firearms? Guns for sale, right? Gunbroker.com. Let's move to the area of firearms here, right? eBay does not allow people to sell firearms, right? You can sell all kinds of other stuff that's related, you know, like sights and different kinds of paraphernalia. But eBay will not handle firearms, and that's what you call a vacuum, right? What is it they say about nature and vacuums, right? I mean, nature hates a vacuum, right? It's like, so that, you know, something had to take up the slack, and that something is Gunbroker here. When you buy something from Gunbroker, and then this is the biggest market for firearms there is in the world, right? It's like, you know, this is absolutely fabulous where you can find everything from an ordinary, you know, 22 or AK on up to like something, you know, like a double square bridge Mauser or something, you know, like if you've got, you know, Cape Buffalo, which has been raiding your garden or whatever, right? They got stuff to handle it. You know, when you go to buy something from Gunbroker, you don't have them mail anything directly to you. That's illegal. What you do is you find somebody reasonably close to where you live, and you have, you know, you pay for the item. You have them send it to the person with the firearm license, FFL, right? and then that person, they charge a fee for doing that. Now, you can usually find somebody who'll do that for $25 or $30. It's like in Texas, most of the stores, which have like open storefronts, open 5 days a week, are going to charge more like 45 or 50 for that. Now, what that means is that, it adds a layer of cost that for some cases it doesn't really mean much of anything. For other cases it does, right? If you're talking about a pistol that you're paying $300 or $400 for, they don't want to spend an extra $100, like on shipping and transfer fees and all that kind of good stuff, right? For some kind of a less common shotgun or something that you're spending $1,500 or $2,500 for, then the extra $100, the extra $50 to $100, like for shipping fees and transfer fees and all that kind of stuff doesn't really cause any pain, because you're saving so much money, buying the more expensive item. Down here, if you just log in to Gunbroker, right, which is what I've done here, gunbroker.com, go to buy, right, and then help wanted how to sell a gun, somewhere here, articles, FFL dealer services, somewhere here, Gun Genius, somewhere here, they've got some kind of a little thing here which you just feed in your own zip code, right, and they will give you like numbers and a readout of people with FFLs that'll do transfers close to where you live, right? Do I need an FFL, right? Somewhere here, search articles. I mean, I had this a moment ago. It's like, I wasn't having any trouble finding it. Hang on. Drives me crazy. Anyway, well, let me just show you a couple of the things that that I would recommend you look at. There's nothing more fun than looking at rich people's firearms, right? If I just go to Gunbroker, just the home page here, right? Browse categories, right? Browse categories, guns and firearms, guns and firearms, pistols, semi-auto pistols, right? And the most common kinds of things are going to be like 9mm, SA/D, single action, double action, right? That gets rid of all the striker fired pistols. Because I don't want to see that, right? It's like, I get a very warm, fuzzy feeling seeing a hammer down on a hammer fired pistol, right? I mean, striker fired pistol, I mean, you don't know what the hell's going to happen if you look at it cross-eyed, right? I mean, rather than not bother, right? 9mm, single action, double action, right? SA/DA. And there are all kinds of possibilities. It's like, you can sort by price, cost, you could sort by anything. It's like if I price tag from, say, 200 for 244 to say like about 444, right? You wouldn't think that you could hunt deer with something like that, would you? I mean, Dale, you ever heard of anybody hunting deer with a carry pistol like that? Daryl?
I'm here, but I don't know if he
Yeah.
is.
Sorry, I was getting something to drink. No, I
That's right.
haven't.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of anybody hunting deer with a pistol like this?
It's possible.
I'm telling you, this got to be a whole lot more possible. It's like, well, let me show you what you would need to do it.
I mean, you can actually use a 22 if you know what you're doing.
If you know what you're doing, yeah, but you have to get it pretty close, right? It's like, it's going to take a good shot. This is like a, you're going to have to pick a pistol to carry around. It's like, I like this one. This is called a GERN Regard. It's a knockoff of I wouldn't call it a copy exactly. It's actually an improvement over the M9. The M9 is the Beretta pistol that got made into the standard U.S. Army and NATO pistol from about the mid 1980s until like about 3 or 4 years ago, right? And I still like this better than I like that pistol that they've started using now. This is not a carry pistol. It's like, or you could carry it in a holster, right? But I mean, it's big for a carry pistol. It's a 9mm pistol. It has a magazine that holds 19 shots, 18 or 19. It might be like 18 in the magazine and then one in the chamber, right? It's got a 5-inch barrel, a lot of power, right? The barrel does not tilt, and like, hammer fired, right? It's got everything that I would recommend for a pistol. And what else do you need to hunt deer with something like this? It's like you need some kind of ammunition that's faster than your normal pistol ammunition, okay? You need something like this. You ever heard of this? This is called Pilgrim ammunition. Okay, they keep reinventing simple things. Like this is a new breed, a completely new breed of pistol ammunition for 9mm 40 Smith Wesson. You're looking at something that was like about a 60 or 70 grain bullet moving at 2,000 feet per second. Now that's fast enough to hunt deer with. I mean, like 90% of all the killing of game animals in the world, really, not just North America, is inside of 100 yards, right? So that if you can reach out and kill like a white-tailed deer, like at 70 or 80 yards, right, then, you don't need rifles anymore. All of a sudden, it's like you could hunt deer without having to lug a rifle through the woods, right? So that's sort of interesting. This bullet does almost the same thing that aftershock broadhead does, right? It opens up inside. It opens up when it encounters soft tissue, right? It goes through hide and ribs without really losing any energy, okay? And then, like I say, it's moving fast enough that you could, it would be like hunting with a what do I want to compare that to? The 243 or something like that.
A Desert Eagle.
I'm sorry?
They'd be hunting with the Desert Eagle.
Similar, right? But I don't think you need like a 357 or any kind of a magnum caliber pistol anymore when you've got this stuff sitting around. This would, they haven't thought about hunting with this stuff. I mean, this is basically just the advertising just for shooting hoodlums with, right? But I mean, this would be, this would be ideal hunting ammunition. I mean, all they would have to do is to make like a 45 long Colt with that same bullet in it, or, God forbid, like a 45-70. And, the other thing that happens, like when you started using the smokeless powder with your older cases, like those cases that everybody used on the black powder cartridge era were huge, right? I mean, the long Colt, the 45-70, all those kinds of things, I mean, we're frightening enough with just ordinary black powder, right? But when you start loading that kind of stuff like with modern powder, then you've got something that's really terrifying, right? And if you had something like that with that bullet in front of it, then, I mean, you don't need anything else, that I know of, right? It's like you could hunt with that. So that you've got like a bullet which can be used for hunting if you wanted to, like with a carry pistol. It's expensive, right? I mean, you wouldn't want to be practicing at the range with that. Okay. You've got at least one kind of a pistol that you could use for something like that. 5-inch barrel, accurate. The barrel doesn't tilt, right? You guys understand the reason for the tilting barrels that you get in most of your semi-auto pistols? Subject ever come up? I mean, they don't teach that in high school, I don't think. It's like, that was John Browning's invention, right?
Firearms to begin with.
I'm sorry?
I've never studied firearms that much to begin with.
I'm not any sort of an expert on firearms, but I think I can answer most questions people would have. Right? The Browning mechanism was made to allow you to use a lighter spring with some of these heavier pistols. That's what you're really seeing, right? It's like the barrel drops down underneath the cartridge which is being ejected, right, on the mechanism of the pistol and tilts upwards, right? And so it holds the barrel in place for a split second until the bullet is out of the gun, out of the barrel, and then it operates the mechanism of the pistol, right? But it lets you use a reasonable spring, right? So you don't have to be like a weightlifter in order to use the pistol, in order to cock it or load a cartridge, right? This pistol doesn't do that. I don't know how much accuracy you would lose because of these tilting barrels, right? It may be just a little bit like at a short distance, and assume that like you're never going to shoot anything more than 40 feet away with a pistol, right? Suppose you want to shoot, something 60 or 70 yards away with something like this. Then do you need to worry about the barrel tilting? Well, I'd rather not have to worry about it. I'd rather have a barrel that didn't tilt, right? This is a Beretta design, right? Beretta allows other people to manufacture pistols like this. The two designs which are common, which don't involve tilting barrels, both Berettas, right? You've got this, and then you've got this thing they call PX4. I don't think anybody uses a PX4 as a standard weapon for a military organization. I think police forces use it, right? At any rate, these are two of the ingredients of hunting Bambi at 70 yards or 100 yards, with a pistol. Another ingredient, right, would be this. You've got like, believe it or not, this is called a Valkyrie, right? This is called an ADE Valkyrie. It's a $100 item on eBay. It's a holographic sight which works perfectly well with pistols. And you have to, that's about a $100 item. There's a fancier version of the same thing, which is called Holosun, which is more like $200. And then you have to come up with a platform. You have to replace the standard rear sight on a pistol with a platform made for that particular pistol and a particular holographic sight, right? But they have them. Again, Nature Force Vacuums, EGW, right? Evolution Gun Works. You with me? It's like these guys sell pistol red dot mounts, right? Dots by Mountain Firearm brand, okay. This would be you can get an idea of what I'm talking about. It's like about a $50 to $70 item, and you would have to replace the rear sight. You'd have to replace the rear sight base, with the sight base for the holographic sight, right? And then, so you're looking at another couple of $100, right? But I mean, you put all this together, you could go out there and you see this is like the slide for a modern pistol. It's just going to ignore the front sight, right? And it's like he's got the base and the holographic sight mounted in the rear. Sort of interesting, right? got all that kind of stuff. Let me get back to Gun Broker just to show you. Hang on, hang on. Like I say, everything from 22s and AKs on up, right? Have you guys ever taken any sort of a look at fancy shotguns?
I
Let's
look at
say-
swords way more often than I look at firearms.
I'm sorry, you look at what now?
Swords. I
Pornography.
collect swords.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you something funny. It's like pornography is like, the last I ever heard was like 80, 85 or 90% of the bandwidth of the internet. In fact, I had a project I was working on once which involved efforts to detect the use of what they call steganography. Now, have you ever heard of that?
Yes. The embedding of information into photos.
What kind of project were you ever working on? Mostly, I would assume if I ever asked like 1,000 people if they've ever heard of steganography, I would get no hands raised. I mean, how did you ever hear of that? What were you doing?
Because of all the research I've done into cryptography.
That's it. Mm-hmm. At any rate, so since these people were studying in this project that I was working on, were studying, and I didn't ever do this, right? But it's like they were studying, the hiding of the possible hiding of information, secret codes and messages and whatnot, in file, in either media files or image files that people were posting on the internet, right? Then, the two most major sources of pictures like that are going to be like, eBay and then porno sites, right? So we had government agents who would have a sign on their desk, and you know what the sign said? This was crazy. The sign said, my job. The sign said my job involves the study of hiding information. Oh shoot, the word again, right? But it's like it involves the study of hiding information in image sites, and going through pornographic sites is actually part of my job. My superiors will explain that to you if you require it, right? I'm not committing any crimes here. This is just to prevent it happening, that some federal agent would be walking around and just, see pornography or something on this guy's computer and just toss him straight into prison. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost comical. Guns and firearms, shotguns, bolt action lever, over and under. This is the point where shooting sports, this is the fun area of shooting sports, right? It's like skeets and sporting clays, especially sporting clays. That's a more interesting game than just ordinary skeet shooting, right? And if you, like Parazzi, right? The people that make the fancier types of here's a shotgun that you could pay like $40,000 for. That's kind of hard to picture, don't you think?
Yeah, I'm lucky if I've got $10 extra to spend on anything.
We had, like where I used to practice skeet shooting, man. I know, this is sort of I don't own any shotguns that cost $30,000. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think most expensive thing like that I own is just a bit over a couple of thousand, right? But we had guys over there at that Damascus Isaac Walton League shooting club who were out there shooting skeets with guns that you would pay $30,000 or $40,000 for. I couldn't do it. You know, to me, it's like a shotgun with a $30,000 price tag on it. It's like that's a conversation piece, and that's not, you know, it's not something you go out and shoot, or at least not very often. Interesting, no, but it's like you can find all this kind of stuff on Gunbroker. You can find like any kind of hunting rifle, any kind of shotgun, any kind of anything, really. There's a question of, you know, what kinds of things does anybody use, like a $30,000 shotgun for? If I could get back onto YouTube. You ever heard of George Digweed? I'm sorry? Dale, are you getting anything out of any of this?
Oh, I'm listening, and I'm also dealing with other issues right now at the same time as the show. But yeah, I'm actually learning a lot about firearms, weapons, bullets.
Mm-hmm. No, it's interesting that that Umarex air saber, I think, is intriguing. That's an improvement. I mean, that's beyond any other way of hunting deer that I've ever seen. What was, boy. And one other kind of thing that I wanted to show you guys, you know, which was related to this sort of thing, and then, you know, we could stop about digweed, right?
I feel like I'm listening to a conversation.
Yeah. Bill, you ever heard of George Digweed?
Yes, I have.
It doesn't ring
You're
a bell
kidding.
to me.
I want to know how you can stop cheating with shooting.
I'm sorry?
I was wondering, I was looking at the video how you can stop cheating with shooting.
He's got friends that have problems. This is the guy that wins all the sporting clays tournaments in Europe, right? He's got friends that have problems with crows.
First world title. So how many competitions has he entered this season? Swimmingly.
We've had a hell of a morning.
He's the digweed. George is often offered big days, but 99% of them don't materialise as big on the day. Andy is putting his reputation on the line here. Happily, Team Digweed plus Crow are already building a serious bag. It's going swimmingly.
We've had a hell of a morning. All these crows and young jackdaws are coming to some wheat that's just on the turn. And because there's been there was no wild food last year, and this year, up until now, everything's been backward. So the corn's only just starting to turn, and where it's just going milky, all of these are coming to some wheat, which is just the other side of the hedge. If you look through that gap there, you'll see them going to the wheat now. We're shooting them on this bit of rape here that's out. It's been sort of, it didn't really come in the winter, and we're able to decoy them on here, and we've had a hell of a morning so far. I would have killed probably 220, 230 in just under 2 hours, so it's gone pretty well. But I think there were so many here, the crowman likes to do a job for himself, with a few, but when it comes to a really big day, he has to call in the 18.
And that's pretty much how the rest of the day carries on.
See how I protected your decoys? I was impressed. I had to protect these crow decoys because apparently they don't work so well when they look at the tea bag. He did offer to put some carpet in here today, but I said as it wasn't red, I didn't fancy it. That's a one-way ticket to not a very good future.
Man, that's a trip. And doing that with a shotgun that you would pay $30,000 for. It was like I said, I couldn't even begin to do anything like that. I mean, a $30,000 shotgun to me is like a conversation piece. You know, that, I mean, what you're seeing here would just never happen. At any rate, shooting sports, right? The other thing I thought we might talk about today was the question of large construction projects. Let me see if that's everything that looks like shooting sports here. I think it is. We've gone over some of this stuff, right? You know, things that you find scattered around the solar system, which are, you know, gigantic construction projects. Right. Okay. This is on bearfabrique.org, right? The Cydonia region on Mars. This was the first thing that came up like in the mid-70s that gave people the impression that like, hey, it's like we're looking at something wrong. This idea that we have about Earth being the only place in our solar system that was ever inhabited, right? Mm-hmm. You could get that impression reading the Bible or reading other pieces of ancient literature, right? I mean, ancient literature doesn't say anything about people living on Mars, right? There's just nothing there. This caught people's attention here. I mean, for all anybody could tell looking at it, it looks like a human face made into some sort of a monument or something, only huge, right? I mean, very, very big. And the official position of NASA has always been that this is a mesa of some sort. It's just a natural formation. And that any resemblance between this and a human face is just what they call pareidolia, right? And
we talked about that before.
I'm sorry?
We talked about that before. Pareidolia doesn't have...
Yeah, well, turns out it's not pareidolia, but that's been the official position ever since. Now, they went for a period of time. It was like public pressure forced NASA to re-image. Once they got high-resolution cameras over Mars, like in the late 90s, public pressure forced them to re-image this area where you have the space megalith and other pyramids, right? And you say you could claim that this was a mesa and pareidolia, right? I mean, at least you're not going to sound totally stupid. You might sound misguided, right? But, you know, here, it's like the first one of these high-resolution images. And here you've got like a human face, which is unmistakable, right? You've got like a helmet or something. You've got straight lines and you've got Bezier curves on a 3-mile scale, right? From top to bottom here is about 3 miles. I mean, that is just humongous. You've got lips, you've got nostrils, you've got eyes. And again, you've got a question as to how you would build something like this, what you would do. I mean, you're not going to hammer out blocks and put the blocks together and then the blocks are going to form this up. What you're going to do is you're going to take stones, which might be the size of, you know, anything from a baseball to a golf ball, right? And pile these stones up into the form that you want, more or less, and then cover all that with some kind of a hard facing like concrete or cement, right? And, you know, until you've got a smooth version of whatever it is you want. And what you've got here is, you know, Bezier curves here, right? There's this helmet that the guy is wearing. This was done like a few thousand years ago, a few tens of thousands of years at the most, right? Probably somewhere between 10 and 15,000 years ago. Okay, probably built just before the catastrophes. Now, meant to be seen from off planet, right? And what you can see is that the wind is coming from the left side here, okay? On the left side of this thing, the face is weathered, right? The whole face that you're seeing is weathered just from the wind and the sand, right? On the right side, what you're getting is that this hard casing is falling away in slabs. You can see like the eye up here on the left, and you know, like I say, you've got like construction on a project on a scale that we've never imagined. There's no evidence on Earth of anybody ever having built anything like that on that kind of a scale, right? Same area, you've got like a five-sided pyramid like the Chrysler emblem, okay? You've got like a couple of perfect triangles, which are, you know, like on the long side here's a mile and a half, okay? And, you know, Mother Nature doesn't do things like that either. A little bit further away, and on one side, not as big, maybe a half a mile altogether, right? But you've got this other little pyramid, which you can see you've got four good triangles here, right? You don't have to use your imagination, really. It's just that you use logic, that's all. Right, you've got these two little rectangular areas down here at the bottom of the thing, and then you've got a sort of a causeway tube or something leading out to that. And you can see if you didn't look carefully, you would think that what you were seeing over here, like where my cursor is, what was another side, right? You're just seeing sort of an apron of sand being blown up against the edges of this thing. That's all you're seeing here. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then you've got at least two other things in our system which are really, really, really big. You've got Phobos, which is one of Mars's two moons, right? Even from the black and white images that they had before 2008, right? It's like Richard Hoagland was saying that you could almost count the rivets. And then like in 08, you started to get these good color images from the University of Arizona, the high-rise project. And here what you're seeing is this thing is made out of metallic strakes. You see a moon is supposed to be made out of rocks and green cheese, right? It's not supposed to reflect light all over creation. This is made out of metallic strakes, highly reflective, and it leads to a number of questions. That there are also rumors, not rumors, really claims that the Russians have taken close by soundings of this thing with that good penetrating radar, ground penetrating radar that they use, and that it has interior spaces which are rectangular. Okay, so this thing is definitely some kind of a space station, only it's about 15 miles across, right? You've got, like over in one little area, somewhere here, you've got a tower of sorts, which, if you just do a search on, just get to Google. What's Google here? Google. Say Phobos, and Phobos anomaly, right? Go to an image search, and you get Phobos anomaly. Not turning up. I don't know why. You've got something that's basically a tower, right? Which is like a docking tower. I'm sorry? It's not turning up right now. This stuff is not arcane knowledge, right? It's like this stuff is available for anybody to take a look at on the internet. Sorry, things like Google and Phobos anomaly. Have I misspelled that? I don't think so. I'm sorry? Sometimes it doesn't work, I don't know, but like for the time being, you're going to have to take my word for that. There is a docking tower of some sort on Phobos, right? And these things, I mean, these images are public domain, right? It's like the government's deal with NASA requires them to publish these things, right? Now, in the past, they've tried to blur some of these images they didn't want people seeing, but they largely, they don't do that as much anymore. As far as spaces we see in the sands, whatnot, there's several of them. There's not just the one. Then you said face on Mars here, right? There are a number of these faces on Mars, right? I mean, most of them are smaller than this. The face over at Cydonia, like I say, is 3 miles up and down, right? I mean, that's just huge. Mother Nature doesn't do things like that at that sort of a scale. Now, what Tom Van Flandern said about pareidolia and the face on Mars was that, the face on Mars was the exact opposite of pareidolia. Real pareidolia, it's like you have a cloud formation or a mountain formation that looks like Aunt Sally or Uncle John or something. And the closer you get to the formation, the less it looks like whatever it was you thought you were seeing originally, right? Whereas with this face on Mars, the closer you get to it, the higher resolution an image you take, the more it looks like Uncle John or Aunt Sally, right? In other words, it's the exact opposite of pareidolia. So that the claim that they're making is ludicrous. And, that's interesting. There's one other thing which is in our system, which is on our own moon, right? We've gone over this before. We've got another thing which is on a gargantuan scale. We've got this thing which is called the alien ship, right? Which was seen in those last few Apollo missions, right? This thing is the size of a major part of New York City, right? And we've got a picture of the Eiffel Tower here, and you can see that this thing is obviously artificial, right? It's very ancient, it's very old, it suffered a lot of damage. I mean, it couldn't fly anymore. It would require major repairs if it was going to fly anymore. But there are two questions that come up, right? Now, the two questions are, like, number one, how did they build these things? Okay? And then number two, why did they build them? What were they for? What was the purpose of something like this? I mean, it doesn't seem to me that you would need these kinds of sizes to do space travel type things, right? So, in particular, if I was going to start talking about, like, how do they build these things, it's like I would take the hardest, I'd start with the worst case, right, which is Phobos, right? Because here, in the case of Phobos, you're talking about like a space station, which is like 15 miles across, right? Now, I've never built a 15-mile across space station. I've got friends that are in the construction, building things for a living, and none of them have ever built anything like that either. So you have to ask yourself, like, how did those guys do that, right? If you couldn't build something like that under today's conditions, and using the assumptions that you would normally make, in today's world, right? It's like, you couldn't build it on, so suppose you had people living on Earth who wanted to build something like that. I mean, you couldn't build something like that on the surface of the Earth and then get it up into space, right? I mean, there's certainly not with rockets, right? I mean, maybe with electrogravitics or something. I don't know, but it's like, there's no reasonable way. It's just the logistics of trying to build something like that would be impossible. Suppose you were to decide, well, gee, it's like I'm not going to build something like that on Mars or on Earth, right? It's like, so I'm going to build something like that in space, right? Well, how the hell are you going to do that? You're going to get an army of people out there in space where you don't have any air to breathe, right? It's like, what are you going to do for food, right? What are you going to do for porta potties, right? I mean, what are you going to do when somebody has to go to the bathroom up there and you got, like, 10 million guys up there trying to work on this stupid thing all at the same time? How do you do that, right? How would you get something like that up into space? It's like, how would you work on it? There's, all of these logistics type questions and no answer to. You see what I'm saying? So that, like, I mean, you've really got to try to think outside of the box to get anywhere with this. I mean, if you look at it from far enough away, you could think that it looks like a rock or something, right? But it's not a rock. And like I said, normal moons are supposed to be made out of dirt and stones and green cheese, right? But I mean, this is made of, you can see it, it's made of metallic streaks, and it's highly reflective. So, for starters, what I would suggest these people had to do was, you've got the Saturnian system, you've got like Saturn and then Neptune and then Mars and then Earth, right? You've got to somehow cause one of these, either Saturn or Neptune, to eject something like this. Okay, and you've read Velikovsky's theory about, Venus being ejected from Jupiter as a means of relieving electrical stress, right?
Yeah.
And that works in a number of ways, right? Venus and Jupiter have the same, to within less than half a degree, right, have the same axis tilt, right, have the same difference between perpendicular and the real axis tilt, right? And then you've got this reverse spin, which is what you would expect if this thing were to be ejected from the equatorial region of Jupiter, right? And that's believable enough. This is just, all you're assuming in this case is that some kind of physical thing happened, right? Now, what you're assuming in the case of Phobos is humans caused something like that to happen, right? Now you're talking about Kardashev, and you're talking about, like humans availing themselves out of some major fraction of the power of an entire planet, right, or an entire star. Right, in this particular case, you're assuming that you're getting your energy from dwarf stars, one or more dwarf stars, right, and that you're causing these things to happen. Well, what sort of technology would you use to cause Saturn, say, to eject something like Phobos? You have any ideas?
I remember reading.
I'm sorry? Yeah, I'm thinking maybe prayer, okay? I'm saying, okay, at this point you're going to have to get back to Rupert Sheldrake and the idea that these dwarf stars may have been sentient, and the humans may have been able to simply communicate some sort of wish to one of these two bodies, Neptune or Saturn, say, hey, we need some kind of a space station or something which we could hammer into a space station. We need it like next to Mars, right? We need it in orbit around Mars or something like that. We need, has to be made out of metal, has to be metallic, right? It has to be something that we could get to with our hammers and saws and sawzalls and all that kind of stuff, right? And cutting torches and make into a space station. So that would be my impression of like how something like that would get built, right? There's no way in the world that humans are going to mine that much ore, that much metal ore, somehow getting it into, put that into orbit around Mars, and then try to do anything with it. That's just ridiculous. Okay. Like I said, the idea of a planetary body or a dwarf star being sentient is just terribly weird to our ears, right? But pretty much all of ancient literature is written as if that was actually the case, right? The Iliad and pretty nearly every other kind of thing, that you read about, like in ancient literature, talks about these bodies as if they were sentient, right? So you've got that possibility. That spaceship on the moon, possibly the same sort of thing, right? It's ejected from another one of these, you know, from Saturn or from Neptune, right, and then hammered or worked into something which looks like a spaceship. Now, that's the one question. The other question would be like, for what purpose? I mean, for what purpose is anybody talking about building anything that big, right? Either the space station Phobos or that thing on the moon, which is the size of a major part of New York City, right? Here's what I think is happening, what I think they were doing. It's like, you know, before you have this transfer of people and aquatic mammals from Ganymede to Earth, these people were living in a natural manner, right? They were, you know, they were just living as if that's the way humans have been made to live, and we don't need to worry about anything else. And we can just frolic and have parties, and we can catch fish to eat, right? And we can get the dolphins and the aquatic mammals to bring shrimp and things like that to us. We can catch them in nets, right? We can divvy them up between the dolphins and ourselves, cook them, right? All that kind of stuff. They never thought about this other part of the solar system, right? And then all of a sudden, you've got this near collision. You've got this point of near contact, between the Saturnian system and this Sun-Jupiter system. You've got humans and aquatic mammals transferring to Earth, and you've got this, this electrical water bridge forming up, and all of this thunder and lightning, and God knows, and this must have been a hell of a sight, right? Can you imagine what Cecil B. DeMille would do with an idea like that? Val, you still there? Yeah, I mean, imagine if we had Cecil B. DeMille to work with us today. I mean, that would be pretty astounding, right? At any rate, once that happened, then the people on Ganymede got their asses in gear, right? At that point, they're no longer playing around. At that point, like, oh man, it's like we have to figure what all this shit is about, and we have to get on top of it, right? And it's like, and the faster the better, right? So at that point, it might have still been another 20 or 30, 40,000 years between that point and the point at which the Saturnian system came into close contact again and was captured, right? So they had a long time to think about it. Now, how much time do humans need, to go from beating each other over the head with broadswords to flying and building airplanes and building space vehicles? The answer is not very much, right? It's like, the Battle of Hastings is separated from us by about 1,000 years, right? You've got like the Anglo-Saxon king getting an eye shot out, right, with an arrow, and then you've got people fighting with broadswords and all that kind of good stuff. And 1,000 years later, you've got the Wright brothers, and you've got, like, within a space of 100 years, just starting from that, you've got jet aircraft, and you've got, like, every sort of thing. Right, so it doesn't take very long, right? Digital computers, right? You've got all that stuff. It's been done within a space of just 1,000 years, right? So it's like Gunnar Heinzen said, that, like, we get used to listening to these geologists, and paleontologists talk about, like, a million years is not very long, right? Well, it's like, for human events, right, or for anything involving human activity, 1,000 years is a hell of a big span of time.
Mm-hmm.
So that, you've had civilizations on Earth have risen and fallen during that space of time. And see, this is like, I could tell you, just from my own studies, I could tell you about things that have happened within the last 3,000 or 4,000 years. Then I can tell you about things which were going on like maybe 50,000 years ago, right? The Ganymede hypothesis, but you've got this giant span of time in between that we don't know much about, except we know that, like, there was at least one group of humans in our system that were, trying to get organized enough to think about doing something if the day of the shit hit the fan actually arises, right? And comes to pass. And when it became obvious enough that you were going to have the Saturnian system come close again, and it was probably going to be captured, right, because it would be coming in on a spiral path this next time, then they figured that they would have, here's what they would have done. They would have figured, and this is just logic, right? They would have figured, I don't think you need a time machine for this. You don't need to have access to these people and ask them questions, right? I think it's obvious enough as what they would have done. They would have looked at they would have had access to both parts of the system, right? Both the Saturnian system and the Sun-Jupiter system, and they would have seen that the Earth was the biggest, rocky body in either part of the system, right? In the entire system altogether, the Earth was the biggest rocky body. That would be if any rocky body was going to survive, if you really had a day of the shit hits the fan coming, and you had to put money down on what if anything was going to survive, it was the Earth, right? So okay, first off, let's round up, as many different kinds of animals, as many different kinds of people as it makes sense to, right? And bring some of them to Earth, right? To give them the maximum possible chance to survive. Okay. Now, the other thing that they would have tried to do, which gets you into Phobos and into this alien ship on the moon, the other thing they would have tried to do is to arrange some kind of an escape from the entire system for some kind of a very large group of people, right? People and animals, right? But I mean, they would have tried to, they would have tried to provide some kind of an engineered means of taking, let's not have the whole human race perish because the stupid solar system perishes, right? He said, let's get some kind of a very large number of people out of this whole system, right? Not just off of the Earth, not just off of Ganymede, not just off of some part of this thing, but let's all the way outside of the whole system, right? You would have started from Mars, which would have been like the smallest thing, the least amount of a gravity well that you could come of all the things close to our own system that you could take off from. Right, probably Mars, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm thinking that Phobos and that spaceship that ancient derelict spaceship on our moon, somehow or other, were both related to this effort to get people out of the system, right, as a means of protecting them. And there's a couple of ways that might have gone. It's like, it could be that the whole effort failed and the Phobos and that ship were it, right? I don't believe that. I believe that, more likely it would have been something bigger than Phobos. And Phobos was either just a work shed or some kind of a station or something. I don't know. For what they were talking about, I don't know that having interior rectangular spaces would have made any sense. It's this description that you get from the Russians. That's what I believe is going on. Now, that also says, if they succeeded at it, then whatever that was that they built and sent away, it's probably still visible if we only knew where to look, right? Because it's not going to be bright or anything like that, right? It's like, and how far would it have gotten in, maybe 15,000 years since the time that all that took place, right? Mm-hmm. Somewhat quarter of a light year, half a light year, I don't know, right? But it's like our telescopes can pick up Proxima Centauri from 4 light years away, right? So I would have to assume that they could, if we put our minds to it, and if you got just the tiniest bit lucky, you could probably find this thing, probably out there somewhere. If assuming that it worked, that the whole plan worked, and they got this escape vehicle out of the system, right, and managed to save some large number of people on it, then I think you're probably looking at to see if we had any kind of a way of figuring out where that was, or of getting one of these electrogravitic Mars ships, like out to that, and making contact with those escapees, right? And that would be interesting. That's something that would get Cecil B. DeMille's attention, like right now. I think. Daryl, I haven't heard anything from you in a while. You still working on something else? Or?
Well, nothing. Hold on. Maybe we can get Gary the Mad Martian in on these photos of the moon, and also some of these images also that you're having of these meteorites and Mars, because a lot of this pertains to where his research has gone. And I honestly believe it'd be very profitable if I can get Gary to hop in on this show. Give me a few minutes. Give me like a minute.
Okay. So Val, does this whole idea make sense to you? Val, are you still there?
All right, so I'm looking at these meteorites. I just sent this information to Gary the Mad Martian because I thought this would be relevant for him to talk on, because he is the residential Mars, the Madman.
That sounds like a good name. They call him the Mad Martian.
Yes.
That's a trip. I've had people call me things like that, right? But I mean, it sounds like he's a little bit more into it than I am. I mean, what I've just described is my own theory as to, what you're seeing with some of these images. When you look at, the gigantic structures, right? It's like the Cydonia megaliths appear to be made to be seen from off the planet. They're a signal, like in case somebody, like a million years from now, whatever, somebody from deep space happens by, and he would see that and he would try to figure out what had happened, right? But the spaceship, that spaceship on the moon, and then Phobos, those are not made to be seen from our planet. Those are made to go places with large numbers of people aboard.
That's kind of interesting. I'm looking at them and I'm trying to get Gary to click the link.
You've been recording this, right? You got the recording, Gary. If worse comes to worse, we can't get hold of him.
Oh, he's here. Just got to get him to click. There you go. Click the image. There you go, Gary. That's my Mad Martian. He'll catch on. And he should be coming in a second. Because I think it's interesting that, you talk about Phobos. And honestly, it looks
Can
like
anyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
You're back on, Valkyrie. I hear you now. The images of Phobos is kind of interesting. I'm trying to understand what is the glowing water around Phobos.
I don't know that I'm seeing any water. The thing appears to be
The big image you have where it says beautiful Phobos photos.
Hmm?
What is that?
I don't know that I'm seeing water.
Phobos.
Sorry?
We got
It's
Gary the
Phobos.
Mad Martian in the house.
Okay.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hey, how you doing, people? Yeah, that's Phobos.
Yeah, that's those high-rise images from 2008. What you're seeing here is metallic streaks, right? This thing is it's a space station, you know, like 15 miles across. It's an artificial construction. It's not a natural moon. Okay, it's like there's a docking tower or something like that on it, which is called the Phobos anomaly, and which I wasn't able to find a few moments ago. But this, you know, Russians have approached this with a good penetrating radar, and they said it's got rectangular interior spaces. So, you know, this is a space station of some sort, which is 15 miles across. It's a construction project on a scale beyond anything that we've ever attempted, but it's never been attempted.
Even its orbit is bizarre, and it is consistent with the anomalistic nature of that station, space station, and those striations. I'm glad you see that you're showing that image. You can see the metallic nature, and look at the even set grooves. They intersect, they overlap. It's beautiful. The whole thing is grooved, to be honest. But we just need to get better imagery of it. I'm glad they gave us this imagery of it, because even right here, it shows, in my opinion, the best impression. And I'm glad you brought up the metallic nature.
Okay, look, it's like we were talking. I could run this by quickly again. It's like we were talking a while ago as to why or how, you know, as to why they would have built, how they would have built something like this, and why they would have built something like this. To answer the question, how, you couldn't build something like this on Earth and then hope to get it up into space. You couldn't build something like that in space because the logistics would be impossible. It's like you'd have millions of people working on this in space. I mean, give me a break, right? I mean, what if, like, you know, a couple of thousand of them have to use the restroom at the same time? What do you do, right? It's like, you know, there's no way to do something like this. It's like what I proposed they did. You know, are you familiar with Immanuel Velikovsky and with, you know, neo-catastrophism at all?
No, explain.
I'm sorry?
Explain.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Velikovsky had claimed that Venus was ejected from Jupiter, you know, as a means of relieving electrical stress, right? And that works as far as, like, you know, Troy McLaughlin and I had published a book like in 2013, right? It's called the Ganymede Hypothesis. Well, that's what the latest version of it's called. It's called Cosmos and Collision originally. And we'd come to the conclusion early on that you have that human origins and solar system origins have to be studied together. There's no making sense out of either one of them separately. Okay, the two most major keys to understanding the prehistory of the solar system of the human race are going to be eye sizes and axis tilts. Okay, the Sun and Jupiter and Mercury all have axis tilts less than 10 degrees. That's what you would expect, you know, given any version of a theory of solar systems coming into existence. What you would expect to see is like the spin axes of the bodies in that system should be roughly perpendicular to the plane of the system, right? That is what you see more or less, like with the Sun and Jupiter and Mercury, maybe one or two other minor things like that, right? You have, like, nonetheless, you have Uranus out there with a weird axis tilt, and then you've got this other group, which is like Saturn, Neptune, Mars, and Earth that all have this roughly 26-degree axis tilt. Okay, now that's an anomaly. That has to be explained. You know, basically, for these bodies to have the same axis tilt, they had to have been captured as a group. The way this would happen is that these things were not an orbiting system early on. They were an inline system like a Herbig-Haro string, electromagnetically aligned like a shish kebab, right? And these things flew into the plane of the Sun-Jupiter system from the south at a 26-degree angle. And as the individual bodies were captured and peeled off and began to orbit the way they do now, ordinary gyroscopic force caused them to keep that 26-degree angle of approach in the form of axis tilts. Okay? Now, eye sizes, remember I said the two big keys to this whole thing were axis tilts and eye sizes. The Sun-Jupiter system was bright. Okay, the creatures of the Sun-Jupiter system, particularly, Ganymede, which is Jupiter's largest moon, had relatively tiny, humans, dolphins have relatively tiny eyes. Okay, the creatures of the old system, the creatures of the Saturnian system, Saturn was a dwarf star under these conditions. The Saturnian system was a very dark sort of a place to be, right? You had like a grow light type of a room or something, right? You had radiant energy that was bound. The rocky bodies, the Earth and Mars were inside the plasma heliosphere of the dwarf star, right? You had enough radiant energy. It was like, particularly since this radiant energy would bounce off of the interior of this plasma heliosphere and come back to the Earth and Mars from every which direction, right? You wouldn't freeze, but the whole middle part of the light spectrum was it just wasn't there, right? So that the creatures of that age on Earth all had the same kinds of huge eye sockets, right? Neanderthals, hominids, dinosaurs, every single one of them, even the flying dinosaurs, even the herbivores, all had these same kinds of huge eyes, right? And those are the keys to the whole thing, right? At any rate. So what you had originally was was the sun capturing Jupiter, right? Originally, it's like you'd had all these things were separate, like strung out in like a Birkeland current, Herbig-Haro string alignment, right? I mean, just individual bodies, right? It's like you have Jupiter to the north, to the system north, right? And then the sun, and then these Saturnian bodies, right? Further to the south. Okay, the sun captured Jupiter, but then in doing that, it slowed down, right? So that caused the Saturnian system to catch up with the sun, right? So that somewhere along about 50,000 years ago or something like that, the Saturnian system made a close approach to the Sun-Jupiter system, right? It was like the two things on the outside, the two things on the edges are going to be the two largest rocky bodies in either system. Could be the Earth and Ganymede, right? You had an electrical water bridge forming up between the two. You had like humans and aquatic mammals transferring from Ganymede to Earth at that time, right? That was maybe 50, 60,000 years ago. And then the Saturnian system bounced. I'm sorry?
That's short a time frame, huh?
Yeah, then the Saturnian system bounced backwards, and then like another 30, 40,000 years went by, and it recurred, right? The thing made another pass at the Sun-Jupiter system, and this time was captured. Now, when that happened, the people living on Ganymede could still, who had become technically advanced in that much time, right? It only takes a couple of thousand years for human beings to go from broadswords to aircraft and space exploration, right? They could see that there was a day of the shit hits the fan coming, right? They could see that like there was going to come a day when the southern system, the Saturnian system was going to be captured outright, and they had no way of knowing whether anything was going to be, anything in this system was going to remain habitable at all. Okay, like what the fuck do we do, right? Well, it's like I believe they tried to do two things. They figured the Earth was the largest rocky body anywhere in the system, so they figured, okay, if anything's going to survive here, it's going to be on Earth, right? So we're going to get animals and people from other inhabited bodies. We know there's three places that were inhabited in the past. There's like the Earth and Mars and Ganymede, right? There may have been others we don't really know. Okay, nonetheless, I said we're going to bring at least some humans and some animals to the Earth and let them try to survive here, regardless of what happens. And then we're going to try to engineer some kind of a large-scale escape. And this is when you get to Phobos, right, and what Phobos, I think, was about, and what that big artificial ship on the moon, you've seen those pictures. I'm guessing. The alien ship on the moon, you've seen that?
Flash it so you can see. You seen that, Gary?
Yes, I know what he's talking about, the supposed Apollo 20 craft, and I have seen it in the imagery as well.
Okay, and this thing was about the size of a major section of New York City, right? It's like, the question is, what did anybody need these kinds of structures for? And the answer is, I believe, that they needed, they said, okay, we're going to try to arrange some kind of a large-scale escape from people from the system, completely away from the system, right? We're going to say, hey, we're not going to have the human race go extinct, just because some stupid, star system goes extinct, right? And I believe that ship on the moon and Phobos both had something to do with this escape attempt, with this effort to engineer some kind of a massive escape. Now, how do you build something like Phobos? I think one way or another you have to cause either Neptune or Saturn to fission something like this off, and just say, hey, it's like we need something that can be hammered and blowtorched into something which we could use as a space station, right? It needs to be big. It needs to be 15 miles across. It needs to be made of metal, and we have to be able to work with it, right? And that's what I believe you're looking at here.
Okay,
Russia has plans, along with ESA, to actually go, and this is their exact words, sir, to go pick up organisms from Phobos. Now, I think maybe they're looking more along the lines of maybe what you're talking about in actuality. But what do you think of that concept of what they propose?
To me, it's like, all of Mars, including Phobos, is like an archaeological site, right? It's like, you don't build condos on an archaeological site. I would be surprised to hear there was anything living on Phobos that was worth worrying about. I'd be much easier time believing that, like, you could cut your way into Phobos with torches and find technological things, right? That would be a much more. Now, as far as like organisms, living things on Mars, it's like, have you been keeping up with these images which have been coming back for the last 20 years, the last 25 years?
Yes.
I mean, it's completely staggering. It's like, these images, it's like Mars is not a dead world. It's like you've got indigenous humans living on Mars. You've got small animals. You ever seen this picture called the squirrel on Mars?
I've probably seen it. I don't recall the name.
It's like the little rat tail thing that they found. They call the squirrel.
This went viral on YouTube and Google like about 6 or 7 years ago. It's like, it's just as plain and obvious as can be. You've got like basically some kind of a small.
Some people are calling it a rodent. Also, I know what you're talking about now.
Small rodents, it's like it could be a big rat, or it could be like, it could be a squirrel. It could be, I would say, probably ground squirrel, or something entirely similar to a ground squirrel, right? But there he is, sunning himself between a couple of rocks, and as plain as can be. And there's no way to claim that's a rock or any sort of pareidolia or anything. It's close range.
Okay, my question is this. Does anyone think that Phobos will crash into Mars? And what about its counterpart, the other one? Was it Deimos?
Deimos.
Yeah.
Deimos.
The children of Mars.
Your friend just mentioned the orbital parameters of Phobos. Yeah, it will crash into Mars eventually. It's like, the orbit of Phobos is deteriorating. That's known.
And will our moon actually drift off and become part of the asteroid belt?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I mean, I don't know. I haven't really kept up with moon science very much over the last 20 years, right? But I haven't heard anything like that. I think the moon is good for where it is for the foreseeable future, I'm guessing.
They have stated that it's moving out something like an inch a decade or something like that.
Yeah, well, that would take it quite a while to break out of orbit. The interesting things in our system are going to be like, Mars still, Ganymede for sure, right? And then those other Galilean moons, the other four, whatever, however many it is, large moons of Jupiter, right? Jupiter's got like 70 or 80 smaller moons, right? But the 4 or 5 large moons of Jupiter, we don't have much in the way of images coming back from Ganymede. We've got like a few, right, which were taken like with one of those. I forget which one of them. It was like about 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and
that's what I was going to bring up too, because if we get more images of Ganymede, according to your theoretical theorem there should be techno-signatures that should be able to be seen of such a past presence, if not extant.
There's a couple of things on Ganymede which appear to be artificial, but they're on such a scale that it beggars the imagination, right? So it's like you have to ask yourself, am I ready to believe that anybody could have ever built anything on this kind of a scale? And I've got those images in that book of mine. The latest chapter and verse of that book. It's a free download. It's on the internet. That's called theganymedehypothesis.com, right? And the
Can
book
you throw that link up in the chat, sir?
I'll send it to you, Gary.
All right. But that's not too far-fetched, because you're talking to a madman here that sees Mars as an artistically sculpted entire planetary surface. So,
yeah.
Mars is much larger than Ganymede.
All right. Are you guys still seeing my screen here? Am I still sharing my screen?
Yeah, I see Phobos there on the right, and other little photos of Phobos.
Okay, look. Let me get to something else here. Let me go to www.bear. No, it's like IK.
I think this guy should be on the Martian Revelation one of these days.
I was telling you about him.
Yeah, okay, watch for a moment. It's like videos. It'll take me a moment to find this, right? Mars and Ganymede, okay, our Black Op manned space program, right? I've got like about 5 or 6 kinds of files here. Like where do we even start? General Mars images. We'll take them one at a time, right?
All right.
This is 1996 and 1997 photo taken here, like the NASA image is called PIA 04995, right? You got footprints here. But what
Can you zoom into that?
I'm sorry?
Zoom into that.
Yeah. Give me a second. You've got footprints here in the bottom right-hand corner of this image. P as in Paul, PIA 04995. Best to download the TIFF image lossless. Okay, it's like JPEG images lose clarity. You can see the footprint here. That's not an ancient footprint. That's a recent footprint. I've got my own theory as to what caused this, right? I believe this is like U.S. government workers. This is evidence of U.S. government workers on Mars in the mid to late 1990s. Okay, this would have been the first case, and you know, the guy had told them to investigate this area when they finally got rovers and cameras up there. When they finally did, it's like they came and took a look at it. You've got also in that bottom, in that same bottom corner, you've got a number of artificial things. You know, that one little thing that looks like a bell, another thing that looks like a waffle iron. You've got gigapan images now, which are large sequences of rover camera images strung together to form a cohesive, very, very large. You can see the jaggies up on the top right.
Right.
You know, each one of those little strips is like maybe one day's worth of rover image, right? Here's this gigapan, the new window, right? If you didn't know what you were seeing, you see it's like they've got Facebook groups that have the number of eyes that it takes. I mean, you know, NASA doesn't have the number of eyes that you need to do this. So you can see the jaggies up here on the top right. You know, it's expanded here. And if I expand the whole thing, you know, then these images are made to be panned and zoomed right now. Here, I mean, all it looks like you're seeing is dirt and sand, right? You wouldn't think there's anything more to that, but it's like, you see, well, like I said, NASA and the JPL do not have they're just government agencies. They don't have the number of eyes it would take to go over this image. It's gigantic, and this is a gigantic image here that you're seeing. They don't have the number of eyes it would take to go over this pixel by pixel, right? Whereas Facebook does. Facebook, you know, you talk about like, you know, retirement. Well, all of a sudden, the situation you had 30 years ago, where you always had more money than you needed, but never enough time. Well, that just got turned around. Now you've got all the time in the world, but you don't have, you know, money to be out like doing all the other things you'd like to still be doing, right? But anyway, this is what these people do. It's like they sit around and they go over all these images, pixel by pixel by pixel, right? And if I keep on zooming in until I get like maybe a quarter mile or so from this image here, we're going to get up towards the area a little bit above and to the left of the camera. You see you've got the camera over here right in front of you. Okay. And then down here, let me show you what all you've got. You've got like what looks like a boulder, except that boulders don't have like gull-wing doors like an old 300 SL Mercedes.
Right.
This is a gull-wing door. Here you've got a piece of angle iron coming out of a rock formation. Here you've got like the head of a statue lying. I'm sorry?
There's a lot of heavy metal on Mars. I also believe Mars, in order to be artistically sculpted on an entire planetary scale, that the majority is all metallic and maybe gold and other malleable material.
I don't think you'd go there looking for gold. Look, it's like, here you've got the head of a statue lying on the ground. And then here, what you've got is a strawberry blonde, which is not normal for Mars, right? So this is like a U.S. government worker with some kind of like a small, like a minimalistic oxygen tank. You know, I've been told that the air on Mars at ground level is about like on Earth at 12 or 14,000 feet. Okay, so you could breathe it. Okay, it's not an ideal thing to be breathing, right? But you could breathe it. You know, humans could survive on Mars without anything really. Okay, and the indigenous people you don't see wearing oxygen tanks. The indigenous people don't have strawberry blonde hair. Okay, this woman has strawberry blonde hair. She's got her back turned to the rover, so she knows what it is. She's not concerned about it, right? I mean, if it was indigenous, she'd be looking at the rover, try to figure out what it was, right? If she was indigenous, now this woman is also looking at the head of the statue. If it was an indigenous
I was just going to say that. It looks like a face right there above her.
Yeah, that's the head of a statue lying on the ground. Okay. This is the head of a statue. This is a U.S. government worker. probably GS9 to GS11 or 12 or something like that, right? And, you can see, let me break out of this. That was, I just sort of opened up that GigaPan image. So you've got window closed, yeah. Here, got just a little bit more zooming, right? This is the U.S., the woman I call the government worker, right? Here you've got the old picture of the face on Mars, right? Which they might you could claim this was a maze and not sound totally stupid, right? But then you get these newer high resolution images. You see, and this is like 3 miles from top to bottom, and Mother Nature doesn't do straight lines of Bezier curves, like
a mile and a half in length, 1 mile wide by 1,500 feet high. And that whole face is entirely art sculpted, and the features around it that it sits on is also art sculpted. It's not dirt and rock, it's metallic.
Let me tell you what I think you're seeing here, okay, Gary? It's like, I've got my own theory as to what goes into this. It's like you're not going to carve something like this out of metal, I don't think. You would pile rocks up into the form that you wanted. Okay, these rocks could be the sizes of tennis balls or golf balls or whatever, right? They're going to be smallish. You're going to pile the rocks up into whatever it is you think you need. Then you're going to put some kind of a hard casing over top of all that, like concrete or cement, right? And what you're seeing here is that, like, the wind is coming from the left over here, so that you're seeing that everything on the left side of this whole item is like, it's smooth, right? It's
sandblasted.
Yeah, it's sandblasted. It's like everything is reasonably smooth on this left side, our left. Of the image, right? You've got lips, you've got nostrils, you've got, on the right side, it's like this concrete face, this hard facing that you put over the whole thing is falling away in slabs. You see, that would prevent trying to claim that this was like, the whole thing was like carved or just made with torch. I'm sorry?
It was carved. Is there any way, I'd like to add a couple images up to the chat, Odin. I don't know if you'll be able to show them to the speaker.
Just go ahead and add yourself. And while y'all doing that, I will be on the other side doing another show. Y'all have fun.
Right. 10 minutes left on here. I just wanted to chime in, but go ahead, sir. I'm going to add these couple pictures to the chat in the Skype. And you can see them if you want to show them. That'll be cool, but just for your reference.
Hey,
go ahead.
How about this? Rockky gave us the 8. I can hear you, Rockky. Rockky gave us the 8:20 for the show. He gave us a little overtime. How about this? Gary, what day are you free?
What day am I free?
Yeah.
When?
Like this week.
I would say Thursday.
Theodore, what are you doing Thursday?
Nothing that would interfere with what you're talking about. What time do you need me?
What time, Gary?
What, afternoon, evening? What are you talking about?
You call the ball. You know my style.
I guess afternoon maybe, or, just not doggy time.
Not doggy time. So say around say 3 p.m. your time would be 5 p.m. our time. Right now it is 5 p.m. We're looking at about 2 hours of freedom.
Yep.
So say
you're saying 5 p.m. like Eastern time?
That'd be 5 p.m. Eastern. That'd be 4 p.m. Central. That'd be you. And Gary would be Mountain West. And wow, that's a pretty picture. You see it? You could just, we'll do this. Thursday, everyone, Let's get back together. Say 5 p.m. I love that. And what's that round thing next to the face, Gary?
Hold on a sec. I want to put one more in. Then I'll get focus what you're talking
See,
about.
Gary is one of the lead people that do. What was the word we're gonna put it as? You take
I'm an
the
image processor of NASA, various NASA imagery and other space images of missions of Mars, and image analyst.
He just
I
loves
study
Mars.
surface intently.
Gary loves Mars. I think you two together might crack something about Mars and even give me some Venus, hopefully.
I thought I was still sharing my screen. Is anybody else doing anything?
I can see your screen.
Gary was
No,
adding.
I'm just adding images up to this chat here. That's not visual for the screen. I see your screen, sir.
Okay. Just let me just show you a few more of these pictures before we break off for today. Look, it's like you've got this one other pyramid here, which maybe doesn't look quite as much until you.
Oh, it's a pyramid.
Yeah. Well, I mean, once you figure out what you're actually seeing here, then for sure it's a pyramid. There's no question about it whatsoever. You've got like a causeway and then a couple of little tennis courts or something out here at the end, right? But this is definitely. I mean, you've got like 4 perfect triangles here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, cities and villages. Have you ever seen this? It's like that they smudged this image. You know, it's like just using like brightness and contrast, right? Nothing else, and made this look like just a sort of a mountain area, right, or a volcano. Something. It doesn't look like there's anything interesting going on here. All you have to do is readjust the contrast and the brightness just a little bit, and here's what this turns into, right? And all of a sudden, it's like you're looking at urban infrastructure. You're not looking at a desert or anything like that, right? Here's another case like that. This was harder to de-smudge, right? This was a JPEG image. You had to do a little bit more in the way of work, you know, to get back to something like it originally looked like. Here you've got vanishing point perspective, you've got bridges, you've got streets, you've got
shadows,
major kinds of urban infrastructure, small villages, right, like terracing, suburban infrastructure. Other kinds of things, right, like sandbags. This is like mechanical junk and debris strewn across the sands everywhere. You know, mechanical junk, debris, water both standing and flowing. Not large rivers, not large lakes, right? Small rivers, small lakes, streams, right? This could be some sort of a barber shop or something. I don't know. It's like not. No, it says like that's not normal. That's not something that occurs in nature, right? This is like, I mean, nobody ever took a manhole cover up on a spaceship, you know, like on an Apollo mission to Mars, right? So we need a manhole cover up here on Mars. I don't know what the hell this was originally, but
it's a disc.
It's definitely. I'm sorry?
It's a full disc.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's definitely artificial, right? Padlocks, funnels, common things, right? Wooden beams, leftover things, right? Entrances to subterranean areas.
That's pretty cool. That
the people living on Mars today are living mostly underground, right? They're coming out, you know, like for 30 minutes or 40 minutes with sunlight and vitamin D around noontime, and then going back, right? Now, these are like, you know, entrances to subterranean areas.
Yeah, I call them the subsurface illegals.
Yeah, right. This here, take a look. I mean, perfectly rectangular. Yeah. It doesn't happen in nature. Structures, right?
Look at that metal.
Look at all that metal.
Yeah, all kinds of metal. Martian Sphinx, right here. You've got like a sort of a storage house or something like that. Then you've got a statue which is lying on the ground in pieces, right? It doesn't take much to turn that statue back around with Photoshop. Right here you can see this little storage house. I mean,
2 minutes.
Whatever this is perfectly rectangular, straight lines, right? Here you've got, you see what I mean? Here's this little house, and I mean, it's obviously artificial. Here you've got somebody that's used Photoshop and has turned this thing back around as much. Like the story that Dave Garner used to tell about the girl that wore a motorcycle jacket backwards to keep the wind out of her neck, right? Any rate, here, just a short distance away from all of that stuff, you've got like a sort of a storage house or something like that with a gate, and then like stacks of something or other, like just inside the door, inside the gate. And then here, I mean, this is water, okay? Make no mistake, this is like a small pond or a small lake or something. And somewhere here, this was this thing we were just looking at here. They've got the red circle around.
The statue.
Yeah. Yeah. Phobos. Here's the thing I was talking about. This is the Phobos anomaly.
Phobos
Okay.
anomaly.
The pimple.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. A docking station or something, right? Red, orange, woolly bullies. Right here, you've got the camera turned back into the rover, and here you've got like a little red, orange, woolly bully trying to decide whether he. I'm sorry.
All right, guys, I got to slide off. It's 8:20.
They're
All
gonna
right.
get.
But
I gotta go feed my puppies too. So Daryl,
Thursday,
what'd you say Thursday?
5 p.m. my time. Y'all downcrease it to your time. We're gonna go Mars and Venus. Shit, we
Sounds
might
good
just go.
to me. I can share screen, show some images, right?
Yep.
All right, sounds good. It's nice to meet you, sir, and everyone else, whoever's on here. Well, cool, almost kind of chatting here. And
I've
check it
just
out.
been sitting here listening, letting y'all run the show.
Okay, they call you the Mad Martian, huh?
Excuse me?
They call you the Mad Martian.
Yes, amongst other things. I'm known as the Mars Revealer.
Right. Well, no, I mean, there's worse things you can be called. That's perfectly good. This is a little red, orange, woolly bully here trying to decide whether or not he should be chewing on the wiring harness of the rover. I mean, is that a trip?
Yeah, woolly bullies.
Okay, Rocky, give me 20 seconds. I'm setting up.
You got 17 seconds.
All right. All right,
Okay.
everybody. I'm disappearing. Love y'all. And the show has ended.